Today on the More Profit, Less Stress, we're talking with Barry. Barry has a huge history in business. He was one of those guys that started with nothing and worked his way up to a position where he could actually sell his business into retirement. We're going to discuss some fundamentals of business that kept him going, but more importantly, we're going to talk about the aspects of human-to-human contact that's so important as you build a business, some of the lessons he's learned along the way, and more importantly, how you can apply those exact same lessons to what you're doing today at literally no risk or cost to your business. I'm Dennis.
And I'm Greg.
And this is the More Profit, Less Stress podcast,
where we provide the tools for more profit and less stress in your business now so you can turn into a valuable asset later. Welcome to the More Profit, Less Stress podcast. Our guest today is Barry Ghiglione. And the reason we're bringing Barry on is, as we like to promote, business isn't just about loving what you do every day and making a profit. Those things are important, obviously. But we wanted to bring a guest on that will share his experience, not only just owning a business and the trials and tribulations along the way, but the important part is building a business to sell for an asset one day. And Barry's one of the people that's been able to do that. And it's an important part about what we like to promote in the More Profit, Less Stress podcast in our program. So welcome, Barry. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, background, what kind of business, just kind of the short version. Then when we get into the podcast, we'll get more details.
Sure. Well, thank you. And I appreciate to be here. And thanks for asking me. I think my background is pretty typical. I grew up in southern Saskatchewan, a typical farm kid, a typical farm background, and almost pre-programmed to be a farmer, except that really wasn't in the cards for me. And I went out to conquer the world. And there's lots to conquer. You find out real quickly. And you find out how small and insignificant you really are. But anyway, I did farm for a bit, went to school a bit in agriculture and that. But at that time when I was farming, it wasn't the greatest thing. It wasn't certainly like it is today. And I guess it's equally difficult today as it was then. But the numbers have changed a great deal. But I think I was one of these guys that was probably born as an entrepreneur. And I do believe it's almost in your DNA. I always wanted the chance to do my own thing, do it my way. And so in my early 30s, I started a rental business in Saskatchewan and started out doing quite a few things wrong, but managed to survive them. And then I spent the next 35, 40 years and still in business in some fashion. And so that's kind of been my story. I'm probably somewhat typical to a lot of people that started with very, very little, just through determination and dreams and a lot of details.
You had said something intriguing before the podcast when we were talking earlier, that you thought like being an owner can be a lonely place. Expand on that. What do you? Because I think there's a lot of people that will agree with that.
Well, it really is a lonely place, and when you're in a small business, the well-being of your business, the well-being of your staff, and I suppose even to a lesser extent your suppliers and maybe customers, depends on the decisions you make. And the decisions you make are based on the experience and that you have. And when you start most businesses, and I don't care how good you are, how smart you are, you certainly have not all the answers. You barely have any of the answers. Even though you think you might, you don't. Mm-hmm. And the reality of running a business is just a lot different than it says in the textbook. And if there is such a textbook. Any of the things I learned in business I didn't get from going to school or whatever, and not that I knocked that, because in hindsight I would have liked to have spent more time in some kind of business school and in management and that. But along the way you learn it through, I guess, the hard knock. And those are really, really profound lessons. It is a lonely place, and you have a lot of people depending on you. And I remember toward the latter part of our business when we'd have a Christmas event. And, and you'd invite everybody out and their families, and you see all the young families and kids are in university and all this stuff. And it really hits you how many lives you affect, even running a small business. And it's really momentous in my mind to see the effect of an idea had. And it's on so many people. So when I say that it is lonely sitting at the top, and not that it's impossible, but it really is a heavy responsibility, and most of us feel that in different ways, But as I said, looking around, and particularly at the family, from little to big kids, and the spouses and everyone depending on it, and on your decision to a certain extent, and your vision and ideas, and that it's profound. It really is. I know a number of other business people, kind of the same demographic as me, that have been in business with somewhat larger businesses and will feel the same thing. And there's a statement that as I said, sitting at the top of that sort of in that chair, sometimes you really realize that what kind of what you've done, and it needs a lot of thought and to make the right decisions. Not that you always make the right ones, but collectively, hopefully, you make the right ones. So, anyway, I would certainly echo that to anyone. And there is a thought that many business people have that says, if everyone knew just how little we actually knew about what we're doing, they'd probably all quit.
It's
They
true.
probably should.
I think half the time it's just bluff and bluster. You're just making it up as you go along to try to make
Well,
sure
that's
and
right.
hold the confidence,
That-
right?
that's right. Yeah. And you have to walk through the door every morning and look confident and happy. And then staff pick up on that because if you walk through the door and you're worried, you're stressed, and even if you are, you can't portray that, because people see that.
Yeah.
And they're very attentive to your moods, your thing. And as you get bigger and you get more staff, it gets a lot easier because now your sphere of people you deal with is smaller. You always have to remember those starters, those quiet ones in your staff that they listen and they think. There's also another theory that says if you want to know what's going on in your business, ask the quiet ones. No, they're listening.
I want to circle back to something you said there, though, about you felt the responsibility of the team and their families. Like at the end of the day, the team and the vendors, right? Your team, your vendors, they're relying on you to succeed, and it's a lot of responsibility, right? And
Yeah.
because the company's success drives their success, and that puts food on their table and pays their mortgage or rent, and that's a huge deal.
It is.
So I think, anybody listening, it's okay to feel that way. That being said, if you embrace it and you let your team know how much you care, I'm guessing, and you can share your answer here, but I'm guessing it probably positively affected your staff turnover, meaning you didn't have a lot of staff turnover because of that. Would that be true?
Oh, totally. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate. I had some very good staff, very long-term, very dedicated, very hardworking
Yeah,
people.
long term.
It really contributed to the overall success of the thing. And I wasn't afraid to share with them the ups and downs. And a lot of people don't like to share financials. But with our key people, I did from a very early time. Some of them weren't always great, but I was never afraid to share them. Because I think staff have you doing one of two things. Either have you making a whole boatload of money or going bankrupt, one or the other. There's really no middle ground. When you share it with them within reason, it was valuable to me, but I had people I also trusted. And I had the good fortune with those initial people when I saw the quality of people they were. I did work with them sort of side by side quite a bit. And we worked together on things, and people like to be involved. You can have pay, you can have all this kind of stuff and bonuses and all that stuff, but what I found people really appreciated was to be involved, to be requested, ask what they thought of things. And many times they bring good stuff forward.
It's really good advice and a good lesson for anybody. And obviously you're sharing that being someone who started a business, succeeded through the business, and sold it for a premium right at the end to retire on. And I think back to my old days in retail, same philosophy you just shared, which is surround yourself with great people. Don't be afraid to share I'm going to say the dashboard, the numbers with them. But to your point, there's some numbers you may not want to share. I get it. But if you share those numbers with them, and if you bring the right people on board and you do what you said earlier, which is care about them and take that responsibility, then they care back and they'll want to make good decisions, and they'll want to, anybody in business or pro sports, right? Or anything in friendship, whatever it is, relationships, if you care about somebody, they'll care back. And if they don't, then they're a wrong fit, right? Obviously. So
they're the wrong people.
Yeah, exactly. And then they're making better decisions in the best interest of the company, and they want to. And then if they do that and they become really valuable to you, you compensate them fairly, right? I mean, it's all kind of intertwined. So that's fantastic advice. So what's your thoughts on I know you had discussed this earlier as well, not today, but earlier we talked, just the business fundamentals, and then maybe layer in the discussion of, yes, technology is advancing, But you had some interesting points on how what the business fundamentals and how they have or haven't changed, and then how technology's coming in and changing. But just your perspective on that, because I think that to set this discussion up, people are so focused on technology. I think sometimes they might miss the point that if you don't know the business fundamentals, the technology doesn't matter.
Well, business, no matter how we package it, with maybe the exception of really the high-tech companies and all that kind of stuff, but business, the world I knew was always people dealing with people. And that's the very basis of it. And the type of business we were in, we developed long-term relationships with clients, but we always had to foster those. And I believe that as a consumer myself, I feel comfortable dealing with a business that I feel wants my business,
Right.
and
What a novel
a
idea.
lot of people, yeah. And some of the big change, they can survive without that because they're so damn big, and
Right.
the coverage is so strong. It really comes down to business, people with business, dealing with people, and you've got to get the right fit of staff. And there's clients, you can't deal with every client. Some clients you can't afford to deal with. Now that might be a little more in relation to the type of industry we're in, but not every customer is a perfect customer. It's kind of a two-way street to a certain extent. But as I said, we were fortunate; we had good relationships with the customers, and I always tried to tell any of our key people, customers, that if they had a problem, not to hesitate to pick up the phone and call me. But seldom did they ever, because I gave my staff a lot of latitude to deal with issues because I did trust them. And the other reason, because I couldn't deal with all of it. It's too much. We had at our normal last 10 years we were in business, we had about 75 full-time staff, 3 or 4 different divisions. And, you can't deal with every issue. It's impossible. You have to, empower your people to do it, make their own decision. And right or wrong, you have to live with that decision. Now, you might want to correct it going forward, and that's a learning opportunity. But you've got to stand behind your people, because if you don't, they see right through you, and suddenly you're nothing.
Boy,
So
I got to
it's
add to that. I think back to our old retail days, and actually, even just recently, um, my wife and I owned a retail store. She managed it. But then prior to that, our old retail days as a family business. And we had a number of rules, I guess, but one of the rules was, to your point, and I love it, we would always say to the staff, any decision you make, we will support that decision, even if it was bad, as long as we believe you are making the decision in the best interest of the company and not your own selfish reasons. So if you're making the decision in the best interest of the company and you made a bad decision, that's on us. We didn't educate you, give you the training, give you the
Yep.
knowledge to make the right decision. But if you made that bad decision in the best interest of your own selfish reasons to hurt everybody else, then I got a real problem with you. And to your point, that empowered people, right? It empowered them to want to make decisions and to want to acquire the knowledge to make better decisions. So yeah, it's really good
Yeah.
advice. I love that.
Yeah.
Um,
Thank you.
when a listener who owns a business gets busy in their business, or a stressful time, or something goes wrong and their brain's just spinning and they're panicking, and it's like, okay, take a deep breath and get back to the fundamentals. What would some of those fundamentals in your opinion be? And I think this is an important subject. So if you can say the fundamental and even expand on what you mean by that.
Well, I guess it
Sorry to put
depends
you
on
on
the
the
nature of
spot.
the business. No, 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 that's fine. That's fine. Because I can rattle away on this stuff because it's
Yeah, good.
kind of been a lifetime endeavor. I think, one of the key things that I found in business, which I liked within reason, was every day when I walked through the door, I had so much to learn. And I think one of the most basic fundamentals I found that helped me was learning from other people. You can either invent the damn wheel with all its flat tires and kinks and problems, or you can speak to someone who's invented that wheel already. And now you have a wheel that works without having to make all the damn mistakes. And you do make mistakes. I don't care who you are. If you're not,
Mhm.
as a matter of fact, if you're not making mistakes, you're not trying hard enough. But man, when
Yeah.
you can talk to someone who has a wealth of business and knowledge, experience on the ground, it isn't all theory. It's reality. There's a combination of both. I think if there's one simple, basic thing, well, I guess there's always other things. It's you got to learn. You got to be open-minded. You got to listen. You have to really listen to what's going on. I mean, everything I learned in business, I learned by listening to my customers, listening to my staff, and listening to my suppliers. I mean, they have so much knowledge. And if you can tie up with groups and leaders and mentors that can help you, it puts you leaps and bounds ahead of your competitor. And that knowledge that you get, that's the most valuable thing you'll get. And I've told this story so many times when I started my business in 1982, 83, it was. I went into an industry that I liked. I'd done my research on it, but I actually knew nothing about it. When I actually, the first day, had to rent my widget. I was in the equipment rental business, and I'd bought this equipment, and at that time it was about $100,000 worth of it. Of course, wasn't paid for, but I figured I had a way to pay for it, and over a few years. Anyway, I got the showroom all cleaned up and got the door open and did our advertising, and we had a pretty good location. And the first client that walked through the door, he wanted to rent a chop saw
So
and our
this was
miter saw.
this was
Anyway,
equipment like worksite equipment, right?
yeah, tools. Yeah. Anyway, what it was, he walks through the door and have you got a miter saw? And yeah, it was $16. And I said, well, $2 for the blade, because I thought that's what you did. And that first customer looked at me and he said, he turned around, and as he's walking out the door, he said, I can get that cheaper down the street at XYZ competitor. I remember standing there thinking, I'm looking around at all this new equipment and thinking, God damn it, have I ever got a lot to learn? Because I didn't know anything about it other than I had the confidence that I can do this. And 35 years later, hundreds of thousands of contracts and, with a large staff, walking through the door in the morning, I still would marvel at how much I had to learn. And if I had success in business, it was because I learned so much of that from other people. I learned it from mentors. I learned it from fellow business people that weren't necessarily competitive. But, asking questions and listening, and every bit of knowledge you can consume, whether it involves travel, whether it involves paying professional help, paying for coaches and all that. Every dollar of that is so worth it. Every dollar of it, because it'll bring you back 10 times that. Because, if you're going to live a life where you're just going to be in your own cocoon and you're going to stumble through it and make your own mistakes, well, you make lots of them. But if you can sidestep so many of them, what an advantage you have on your competitor. And I used to love going to conventions and stuff like that, where I'd meet other people and listen to speakers and get all these ideas. And I'd look around and I wouldn't see any of my local competitors there. And I thought, oh, this is great. They didn't come. So I'm learning stuff they don't know. And it worked. And if I had a problem, if I was going to ask about a specific thing, I had somebody I could ask, because I could phone somebody in Tennessee or wherever. And
Right.
what do you do with this? How do you do this? What do you charge? And you just all those little things, because in business, it isn't necessarily the big things you don't know. It's all the damn little things. But the little things become a big thing when you screw them up. And
What you're basically saying is make sure you take the time to learn from others' mistakes and not just your own.
absolutely, that's the quickest way to get smarter. And yeah, because
So
it's
what were some of those key lessons? Like, you've been in business for a long time, but there's occasionally those conversations you have with people where it's like a foundational change conversation. Like, you don't look at life quite the same way and again, and it changes how you kind of go about business. Did you ever have some of those conversations during your business career?
well, I probably did. I don't know if I could point to a specific one, but here's something the business allowed me to do that I couldn't have done on my own. Because as the business grew and I gathered some financial traction, it really introduced me to another group of people that I would have never known, like other business people and that, people doing a variety of things. And as we went further into life, when we all got a little bit maybe more capacity, it allowed us to do things together. I would have never met those people had I not been in business. I would have never learned from them, even though they were in different industries. And we would never have been able to come together. And for example, we did some investments in commercial buildings and all kinds of things that we did that I could have never done on my own. And having my own business, being involved in a few different industry associations, being involved in some business clubs, it allowed me to meet some really good quality people and people I trust to this day with totally. And because they're such quality people, and there's something about being in business in the long term that, to kind of survive, at least in the world I was in, you had to be a pretty honorable, decent person. Because there's something about business in the long run, if you're going to grow it and that sorts the wheat from the chaff, honest to God. Yeah, so I don't know if I'm answering your
That's
question
no,
around that.
that's interesting to me because like if you listen to employees, there's two different attitudes among employees. One attitude among an employee is, well, the boss makes $1 and I make a dime, so I'm going to poop on company time. Like there's no respect for the actual outfit of the thing. Or the other interpretation is, well, if you're rich, it's because you're unethical. The only way you got ahead was because you had to do things that were shady, illegal. You had to burn bridges. You had to hurt people. You had to take advantage of people. And what you're saying is the same thing I've noticed in the business world, by the way. The further up somebody's climbed, I generally find the higher the level of integrity and
Exactly.
the less they
Yeah.
look down at others around them, where the people that are faking it to get there tend to have the more arrogant,
Yeah.
isolated attitude. So
Yeah.
what you're saying makes a lot of like I think people just need to understand that in the business world without integrity and honesty, you don't survive.
No,
Yeah.
no. And your business will be, whatever business you're in, it'll be just up and down like a yo-yo because you have your good and your bad cycles. But honestly, the ones with some integrity, there is a progression of growth. And it's relatively consistent, not without its, inconsistencies, but it's relatively consistent. And that comes from the integrity of people around them. And I think, when you speak to that whole thing of not becoming arrogant, when I sold my company and we got large enough that honest to God, I didn't know everyone anymore. And I wouldn't even necessarily know all their first names because some of them came and went and knew everything. But there was one staff member, and I'll always remember this. When I sold my business, and he'd maybe been with us for maybe 2, 3 years, and I still remember this. And he was working in kind of one of our labor positions. It wasn't a great position, but it was hard work, as a matter of fact. But when I sold my business, he came to me and he said, thanks for knowing my name. And that just floored me,
Little
how
things like
important it
that.
is. The
Yeah.
smallest thing. And as far as I know, he's still working with the company. I don't know for sure, but I believe he is. I think he might be sort of in charge of that division now, and I hope he is, because there's a quality guy. And all he needed from me was to know that I knew who he was. I knew his name. And I realized that there's a lot of people I didn't know their names because, we had part-timers and all kinds of stuff. There's another theory in business. I mean, walk the four corners. If you want to get out, and you don't even have to know everything that's going on, but wander around. It's amazing what you see. Talk to the quiet ones, and it's amazing what they know,
Yeah.
what they hear.
I need to circle back to something you said a little while ago, and I didn't want to interrupt, but I think it was a valuable point, and I want to expand on it. Is you said, like, listen to your suppliers. I remember thinking back to our days in retail, I realized it's actually, if you look at customers, staff, and suppliers, the suppliers or the vendors actually know best who's doing well and who's not. Like, I get it. The customers know because of their experience and what they get in the service, and they'll make decisions on that. So you can kind of look at where the customer's going to shop, and that tells you who's doing well. But vendors know because vendors are the ones that get paid late or on time. Vendors are
The
the
numbers
ones
don't
that,
lie.
yeah, right. So I remember always thinking back, if I want to know, because in our old business, the biggest part of our growth strategy was to acquire our competitors who were failing.
Sure.
And
Sure.
how did we find out who that was? Go ask the vendors. Like the vendors,
That's right.
and they're not going to
Yeah.
divulge everything, but they're going to, at least the
Yeah.
vendors can tell you who they're shipping, who's on credit terms, who's paying late, and that'll tell you. So I think if I were to circle back to what you're saying earlier, just kind of expand on it, I think it's important for business owners to build great relationships with your vendors and know
Absolutely.
that they're the ones that are going to get asked and spread the rumors about how healthy you are. And that's
Yes.
key in the industry, super important. So
Yeah.
I just want to circle back to that because you have successfully started, because you started the business from scratch, right? So you started, operated profitably and successfully, and then sold successfully. And And Dennis and I talk about this a lot. I guess if we're to share the numbers here, give or take 80 to 90% of businesses fail, depending what statistic you look at. But of the ones that don't fail, and fail means close or go bankrupt, of the ones that don't close or go bankrupt, those businesses, that group, 70% of those don't sell at all, of the ones that even survived, which means a very, very small portion of businesses actually sell. Of the ones that sell, the majority of those sell for basically a minimum amount, like just the assets of the company, right? So, let's say it's a retail store is an easy example. They sell for the inventory of the store, or a restaurant, it sells for the price of the equipment, or a very few sell for those assets plus a premium. And you've been able to do that fairly so. So I guess if you could sort of share a couple of things, two things. One, a business owner who, maybe is listening to this is like, boy, sitting out of my business is the farthest thing from my mind. I'm so freaking busy thinking about whatever I got to do today. I don't want to think about exiting. So I guess one, thinking about in the early stages an actual exit. And then two, maybe some key advice or learning lessons along the way to help you be able to exit the business and exit for a premium, right? Because at the end of the day, that's kind of the goal, right?
Oh, sure it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So one, getting them to think about exit, and two, what are some things they should be doing to work towards that exit?
Well, that's a pretty broad question, but I certainly know because I lived this for many years is that, when you're 25 or 30, you're going to live forever. And people that are 70 or 80 or
Right.
whatever, that's Neverland.
Right.
And it's shocking how quickly that comes. It approaches
Right.
you. And
Yeah.
we don't really give it a lot of thought. And I really believe when you go into a business, you're all about this is my widget, and this is going to be so great, and I can do this, and I'll do whatever I have to make it successful, and you do. In many cases, you certainly try. But and you know what? And thank you for saying I sold at a premium, but I really didn't. I didn't really know when I sold my business how to do it. The reference points I thought I had were not good ones. Well, no, they were okay. It just that I should have learned more about it. I should have learned how to sell in my business. I should have gotten more professional help. And a lot of people, when you say professional, you think, well, you go to your accountant or your lawyer or whatever. But quite frankly, they're not really, that's not what they do. They plug your numbers and they send them off to the government or whatever they do and tell you what you got to pay in taxes and blah, blah, blah. But in terms of how to sell a business, they can be some of the worst ones to ask. And there are business people that can help you how to do this. I was just having a conversation with a local businessman a couple days ago, and he was 71, going on 72, and he can't find any help. And he's got a good business, but what does he do with it? And he's one of these guys who's just going to close. And I said to him, before you do that, you need to get some help. You need to understand what you have to do in your balance sheet to make it look a little more profitable. Don't run to your realtor to sell it, because that's not what realtors do. Realtors can sell your property, but the business is a whole different animal. And learning in your industry, well, what are the multiples that exist in that industry? There's really, that's such a huge field. And I had some education in it. And the time I sold, I thought better value than I would have from a local private equity or something like that, which I did, because I did have a number of representations, but I was fortunate I was in an industry that was being rolled up, and it happened a few times, and there was opportunities there. And the other side of it too, is when you look at the retirement side, and if you happen to have staff, if you happen to have a long-term staff, you really got to think about, well, what liability do I have in turning those over? And is this person that I'm going to sell it to, is he going to take that liability? Is he going to expect me to pay it off and then he rehire them essentially? And your staff are really your biggest assets. But the company that I had assumed all that, so that was a huge thing for me. But anyway, transitioning a business is something that we just don't put enough thought into as young people, maybe even as older people too. But it really becomes so important as you get closer to that retirement age. Well, what do I have to retire on here? And is
Yeah.
this business going to do it? And here again, most of us don't have the financial ability to understand our balance sheets, what we need to do to clean them up, to make them look more presentable. So there are people who can buy businesses if they can understand them enough that, well, this can be profitable. It isn't just a job. you know.
Yeah.
And there's many businesses that are simply nothing more than jobs, and that they'll never be more than that. And a lot of those are franchises, you know. And but on the other side of it, there's some really, really good ones too, and trying to
Yeah.
understand which ones those are. So anyway,
Dennis,
yeah,
we've talked a lot about this subject recently, you and I, and sorry, I'm going to go on a rant here because this, to be honest, pisses me off. But I'll say this to you, Barry. Dennis and I have been talking a lot recently about, seems like there's this number, this plateau. And what I mean by that is a business that, let's say they're struggling or they're new or they're just kind of coasting along. And then maybe they start to figure things out. Great. And they get to a point where and I'm kind of rounding off here, but this number seems very accurate. Dennis and I are both seeing this, which is the owner of the company takes a wage for the job they do. And that wage is, let's pretend, around 100 grand. That seems to be a pretty common sort of number. And then that company, let's say they're doing, $1 million to $1.5 million a year, and they're making anywhere from 10 to 15% profit above and beyond their wage. So if they're doing 1 to 1.5 million a year in revenue, they're making 100 to 150 grand in profit, depending if it's 10 or 15% or whatever number. They make 100 grand in wage. So put it together, and they're making 250 a year, give or take. And we both see this. It's super common. And 250, it gets you a pretty decent lifestyle. You can buy the stuff you want to buy. It's not enough money you can make big investments for retirement later. But, and I do want to come back and ask you about investments in a minute, because I know it's something you've done. I want to come back to that. But they make that 250 number and they're comfortable. They live a great lifestyle. They can take holidays. They can buy the stuff they want to buy, live in the house they want to live in. It's all great. And then they kind of hit the back off the coast, like the coast gear, and think, "Oh, this is great. I'm just going to do this for a while." And here's the issue, because you've been talking about retirement and thinking about the future and what's a company worth. Here's what they're missing. If they sell their company for a good multiple, that multiple will be somewhere between 4 and 5 times profit. Well, if you're making 250 in your pocket a year and 100 that's a wage, the buyer of the business is not going to pay you for the wage. They're going to deduct that from the value of the company. So you're left with this, say, 150 grand profit. Well, times a multiple of 4, that's $600,000. And then you'll get that for goodwill, plus you'll get your assets. Now, I know you came from a business where the asset number was big, and I want to come back and talk about that in a minute. But most companies, the asset number is not big. It might be, 50 grand, pretend. So now they got a company with 250,000 in assets and 600,000 in goodwill. That's $850,000. And I get it. That sounds like a lot of money. What the F are you going to do with $850,000 when you retire? Because you just finished living 10 or 20 years, making $250 a year at a certain lifestyle, and you want to continue that lifestyle. And now you got no salary coming in, you got no profit come in, and you got to live off 750, 800 in retirement. Like, good luck. And again, I get a little excited about this because when that time comes in that person's life, they can't change that decision. They can't go back in time and fix it. So where Dennis and I don't know
Well,
if
and they
struggle is the
forget
right
they forget
word,
a
but
huge component. Like when you get to retirement, there's what's called the boredom tax. When I'm working full time, I have my calendar set up for what I'm supposed to do with my time.
all
When I
right.
retire, there's nothing sitting there that tells me what to do with my time. So now I'm going to invest in things like I'm going to go on trips. I want to travel. I want to see family. I want to eat out more. I'm going to hang out with more friends. So your 250,000 you were living off of is actually less than you think it is, because the time you're now going to spend doing the stuff you want to do is going to show up way more capital than you expected. So even this idea of, oh yeah, I'll make $250,000, but I'm going to cut my lifestyle down, I'll live longer. If that's a thought process of somebody living, it's not going to be true, because you're going to want to do more, not do less.
Yeah.
So it's even more important that you're planning out the exit, including the retirement tax. What's it going to cost you to do nothing?
so true. So true. And the advice I'd give to someone that gets there, and I get why people do that, because all of a sudden you get comfortable, you get
Yeah.
complacent. But if you've got a business and you're now being able to pay yourself 100 grand a year, and you're making 100 or $200,000 a year, to me, you've just lit your goddamn match, finally.
Yeah.
Because from there you can take that and you can extrapolate that. You can start doing other things if you have your business. But if you coast, which is a terrible word, The minute you try and coast, you're in trouble. You're not coasting, you're going backwards. And
Yes.
your competitors are going by you. So
Yeah.
you got to, and I don't know how you instill that. And I know that's an interesting comment about people get complacent at a certain point and they're comfortable. But if you really want to do something, if you really want to benefit from that work you've done, look at your company as a business. Don't look at it as a job. Try and think of it as a business. Because the day I went into business, and I don't know why I knew this growing up in the farm, but I
Yeah.
didn't want a job. I didn't go into equipment because I happened to want to fix a motor. I can kind of do it, but there's a lot of people who do it a hell of a lot better than me. I did it because I wanted to run a business. That's what I always wanted to do. I wanted to have people to run stuff for me. And more than that, I wanted people around me that could do it better than me because I'm only so smart. And we all are. And some people are afraid to have people around them better than them. Well, that's just so wrong. You need good people and you need them to be able to do the things you don't do well and to make changes. And I've said this so often, you see so many young companies start out and they're doing a good job and they've got their trajectory and they're moving and climbing, they're doing things. And then they get to a point where they level off. And at that point, if you don't let people come into your organization, can do things better than you, your business has got nowhere to go like this, and then it'll eventually tail off. But if you can bring in better people in you, it'll start a trajectory again of its own with those new people, with you involved in it. And that's when things become valuable because now, as the owner, you can go do something else. If you have to go to the bank, you got this cash flow, and cash flow is worth 100 times more than a capital is. And every
Yeah.
time you go into a bank, they're looking at your financial statement. Where's your cash flow? What do you got here to pay your bills? And yeah,
And how are you going to
it's
pay us back?
yeah.
Right.
Well, banks
Uh,
know there's three
uh,
basic things, about business that whatever your projection says, it takes longer, costs more, and you're going to make less.
right. I got to go back to something you said, or something we started talking about, because anybody listen to this, like, I think this is such an important point. This whole get complacent and coast when you hit that certain number. And like I said, I think Dennis and I have both seen it's around 250 a year. Uh, I know you've recently retired. If you could give a piece of advice to business owners that are like, oh, yeah, retirement one day, whatever. If you could give a piece of advice so that when they get to that day, they don't go, oh, shit, I wish I could go back in time and do it differently. What number, like, can people retire in 700 grand? Honestly, like, what piece of advice would you give and tell the hard truth? Like, it's kind of an opportunity for the three of us to reach through the podcast mic and smack people in the face and go, hey, listen, you don't get a second chance when that day comes. So here's what you need to know. You need like this amount of money or you got to think about these things. Like you got to live here and travel. And like, what could you say to people so they think about it now and not later when they're retired and it's too late and they missed it?
Build your business. Think about your business, as I said earlier, about as a business, not as a job. If you're in the trucking industry, you might love driving a truck, but really you're in an industry of you're transporting goods. Figure
Yeah.
out how you can make that thing sustainable. Because you look at the really successful people in life, like the Jimmy Pattersons and the Warren Buffetts, and it goes on and on. But these guys that are kind of in grassroots sort of businesses, they didn't build their business to retire. They bought them to run forever. And if they can go into retirement and keep getting a little bit of cash out of it, and maybe the benefit of that business in terms of we get other benefits, then there might be healthcare, and it could be travel. It could be a lot of things that does something become an expense to your business. And I do say this often that cash flow is way more valuable than capital. And for some people, $1 million might seem like an untold amount of money. But when you're in retirement, as you say, my God, you're used to living at a couple $100,000 a year level, and you want to travel. Now you want to do all this stuff. Well, holy smokes, and you finally want that Cadillac Escalade or the Porsche, whatever the hell it is. And you go buy those things and suddenly, well, where did all my money? A lot of the successful people that I know, they don't kind of put an end point on things. They keep wanting to grow. And I think for retirement, if your world can allow you to continue doing things you like to do, that's really retirement. I feel so sorry for people who have jobs that I hate, and they think every day I'm one day closer to retirement. And I
Yeah.
feel
Oh,
so sorry for
or they live for the weekend. Oh, yes, it's Friday.
Yeah, I know. And that's so sad because I think you traded your life for a bloody pension, you know, and for this so-called reward.
Someone
It's
once
so
told me
shallow.
there's nothing worse in life than trading away your best years for 10 years of golf before you die.
That's so true.
Especially in that 10 years of you just learning, and it's frustrating as hell.
Yeah.
You didn't have time to golf before.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so funny. I don't know this to be 100% true, so I'm more asking the question, but I think this to be true. I think in your business, so part of this point you're making about build the business, I believe my understanding is you reinvested back in the business to grow it, right? Versus a lot of people are like, oh, look, I can pull 100 grand out and go buy a speedboat or that kind of thing. So any thoughts or, yeah, what was your pathway there?
Well, I truly believe there's no better place to place your money than in your own business because there you can steward it, you can control it. And we have all these people coming to us with great deals. I can make you blah, blah percent and blah, blah percent. And look what I just made on the stock market.
Look
And
at
I
this
was
penny
lucky.
stock over here.
Yeah. And, I was lucky earlier on in my life. I listened to some of that advice and I bought some really crappy stocks and I got my ass kicked. And I learned, well, I don't think this isn't my future in this damn stuff. And because I have no control over it, but at least in my own business. And I was in
I
the
have the
type of
same
business.
experience. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've always said, if you want a stock market tip, don't buy what I buy because it's probably not going to be good. So, but investing in my own stuff, I like real estate and stuff like that. And that was good to me and continues to be good to me, and and I found some other people around me that had similar thoughts, and we were able to do some things that have been good to us at this stage of life with the minimum of effort. Even at this age, it's still a struggle. I still worry about money, and I mean, I don't sit here and say, "Well, have I ever done well?" I'm comfortable, and I know that, and my family's pretty comfortable, but. I don't think that it's just I don't see myself as any big success because by some people's standards I probably have made a bit, but by a lot of other people's standards I'm just peanuts, and I know
Hmm.
that, and that's fine because everybody has their own sort of threshold. But
Yep.
I still look at opportunities. I still want to do them, even though that enthusiasm might die out fairly quick. But when you realize it's
Well,
a 10 or 15-year investment, I'm thinking, well, how old am I going to be then? Well, just a minute, maybe I'll need that stuff.
oh, but you don't know how long you're going to live either. I think for one things I've seen is that there's nothing more miserable than a man who's got money and free time but no purpose or nothing to do. And that's where I think what it comes down to is how individuals also define retirement. Like it's really hard just to pump the brakes and do nothing once you sell everything. I don't know anybody that's done that well without being completely miserable to be around. Some of the people I know the best are like, well, where else can I go? What else can I do? Who else can I help? How much farther can I get to? And I think if you're not planning for that exit from your business, by the time you go to retire, you may be in a position where you are stuck doing something menial for the rest of your life and still not having that ability to go after and do something you want to do because you haven't built the lifestyle for yourself to keep conquesting, not shut down and do nothing, but keep pushing forward with the assets you have.
It's amazing. Some of the busiest people I know in my life are actually retired people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But retired people who've gone through a lot in their life to get to that position.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
they've worked at
But
a
they're
certain
doing what they
level.
want. They're doing what they want.
Yeah.
They're enjoying life, but they're busy.
Yeah,
Like,
you're
yeah,
way better off to have something that you enjoy doing than retire because that keeps
yeah,
you going. It gives you a reason to get up in the morning. And retirement is a huge shock. It really is. When I sold it
yeah.
and made some changes, and even though I was still involved in quite a few things and still am, the day-to-day routine was gone, and I'd moved cities. And so a lot of my circle of friends were gone, and it was just I was lost, just lost. But I mean, subsequent to that, I've got more engaged in some of the things I was doing. But yeah, that retirement is a real, it's a trap in many ways, it's a trap. And
Right.
find something you love to do, and then you're never, it's not work. And even though and the things that there were many days when I was in business that I didn't enjoy it, that it was hard. You really felt a lot of weight. And at that in time, it drags you down, it really does. And so there is a time comes that you should have a change, I think. And I'm not saying I did it the smartest way or anything. I don't know.
Hey, so I know you had mentioned to me before you have a kind of group of friends who are retired business people, right? And you guys
Yeah.
get together and talk every so often. I'd be really
Yeah.
curious to hear, can you share some things that kind of stick out that group has sort of shared recently? I don't know, just life learning lessons from a group of people that have retired, that now in hindsight are like, oh, here's something I know. Just what's something people would be like, oh, wow, that's insightful. Good to know.
I think for the most part, all of them still want to be engaged and involved in stuff. They want to be able to use their knowledge and maybe money a little bit, but more knowledge. And I think they like to mentor people. They like to help them. They like to see other people's success. I mean, many of them sit on boards, and I do a little bit. And that's reasonably enjoyable because you're kind of in the business world still. But it's funny when you're younger and you're getting together and you're talking about issues, you're talking about banks, you're talking about customers, you're talking about problems, staff, where you're having trouble with that kind of stuff. How do we deal with this? How do we deal with that? Then you get older, some of the problems are still damn near the same because you're talking about money, you're talking about investments, now you're talking about health because that comes popping into it. Well, suddenly, I mean,
Yeah.
we've had one of our group die, and sort of unexpectedly. And you realize, and he was not that old. He was 67. Happened to be the youngest one in our group, but very, very successful, but a nice guy too. But that's life. So all those things swirl around. One of my friends, he loves to play hockey, but his back is bad. I don't know how he does it. He's like 76, and he still
I was
loves
just
to
going to
play
ask, what
hockey.
age is he? So he's playing hockey at 76. That's awesome. I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah,
Good
yeah,
for
I keep
him.
thinking about, didn't you
I
tell me you had trouble with your back?
I feel like an old man because I feel like an old man because I decided to play softball this year at 56 and I'm feeling old. So hockey at 70 something, like
Yeah, I
bravo.
know.
That's awesome.
I know. Yeah,
That's
I
great.
know. But we still talk about a lot of the same issues. We always get together, and what we'll do is we'll have one day where we normally have lunch, but then we have a couple days a year where we just sit, and one of us will be sort of the moderator. But all we do is say go around the room and talk about everybody. Just what have you been doing? It's interesting. What are you going to do more of? What should you do less of? Kind of the same old stories you're always asking. And you'd go in there thinking, well, what are we going to talk about all day? And by the end of the day, like 3:30, 4 o'clock, we're still yapping about it. We're just trying to finish up the last one because we do know each other well, but our problems are different, but so similar in so many ways. But as I said, this group of people that I have, and I find this with many retired, reasonably successful business people, they're just really, really quality people. They're the type of people I could hand them my bank account and just say, come back 10 years later and they wouldn't take a dime, They could be starving, they wouldn't touch it. They're that good people.
Goes back to
And
Dennis's point about people who have achieved success tend to be very ethical.
yeah, 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 yeah.
You don't grow a company by taking advantage of your staff.
No,
You don't grow a business by treating everybody else like it's a product for your own success. People aren't
absolutely.
dumb. They pick
Yeah,
up on it pretty quick. And the fact that you even said the comment around the one employee was just grateful and kind of excited that you knew his name. I think a lot of people go through life feeling like they're just a prop without ever actually taking the time to realize they're not. It's a self-imposed belief system. And I know, like, from a lot of the clients that I've got, yes, the business owner can make quite a bit more money than the staff. It's true. It's why you're putting the risk in there. But when things get tough, you're also making a lot less money
yeah,
than your
Yeah.
staff. You're the first person to take the sacrifice, not everybody else. And I
yeah.
think, just as an important distinction for people that are listening, there is a major difference between a small privately owned business and a major corporation that cuts people for stock price. Don't ever confuse the two. A small privately owned business has always been about the community, and from listening to what you're saying, about the people that work for them, with that massive weight of responsibility that it's not your family you're looking after, it's 75 families
Yeah.
that you're
Yeah.
looking after. And it's
So
the
true.
approach is so different than just, I'm going to burn through everyone and get what I
Yeah.
want. It doesn't exist. What I've ever seen, I've never seen that exist in privately owned business.
You're
Yeah.
so right. So right. Such a good point. Yeah.
It's so true because there's like a lot of the big corporations that are backed by the funds, they'll put in a turnaround specialist, and that turnaround specialist will work usually 4 to 5 year plan. And their goal is to make the
Share price.
financials look better in that 4 to 5 years. But very often, what they'll do is make the financials better in a short term, but they'll make some decisions that actually hurt the company in the 7, 8, 9, 10 year window. But that person will leave after 5 years and go, well, that wasn't me. But actually, the company did downturn because of the decisions they made. They get to walk
Yeah.
away and say, I wasn't there when it happened. So, yeah, to your point, small business, it's a huge deal to do what's right for the company and the people and the community and all that stuff. Love it. Barry, is there anything else? I know we've shared a lot of stuff. Before we kind of wrap up, anything we didn't talk about or that you think would be good insight for anybody, or a closing remark?
I just think that, go into business for, as you say, go in for the right reasons. Don't go into business to be rich. Go into business to do a good job of what you do. And if you learn how to do a good job, if you listen to others, if you value expert advice, good advice, the money will flow from that. But it isn't a quick trip, it's a slow trip. And it's a gradual trip, and you're learning every day, every step of the way. And keep learning, keep listening, keep trying to be the best you can be at what you do. And you don't have to be 100% better than your competitor, but if you're 10% better than them, you can achieve that. And
Yeah.
in many cases, you're a hell of a lot better than that, than your competitor, because they ain't trying. If you try, people will see that.
Interesting about what you talked about, don't go business to be rich. I think that's one of the things that we've seen in a phase of our clients. Number one is I'm in struggle and I'm suffering. So my first goal is to get out of the struggle. I need to work enough so that my finances are secure enough that I'm not struggling or fighting anymore. After the struggle comes the contentment and the lack of pushing forward. And what you're saying is, well, then maybe your focus has been wrong. Maybe your focus shouldn't just be about the money side of things. Maybe it should be about how do you consistently and constantly get better. If you push yourself this far, how far can you actually push yourself?
Yeah.
And I try to tell people, like, there comes a point where anything you can buy, all you're down to now is buying a newer, fancier, flashier version of what you already have. There's not a lot left to do with it. So why not spend the rest of your time pushing yourself to see how far you can go versus just saying, well, it's about the money, because you'll never find satisfaction.
No, the big house and the fancy car and the expensive travel and all that crap doesn't mean a damn thing. You've got to, I think the biggest satisfaction comes from being able to feel you've done a good job. You've maybe grown some people. You've maybe learned some new ways to do things that the industry might be embracing. But I think that's a legacy you leave behind. It's not the fact that you drove a new car, because nobody cares, quite frankly. And even though it's nice, but the boat and all that stuff, those are assets to keep us poor. It's all they are. 'Cause they
Distractions.
depreciate. Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely so.
Yeah. Good advice. Great advice.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing your insights. I think it was, for us, the appeal was to bring someone I know you're being humble and saying, hey, what you've achieved may not be great, but what you've achieved is great, because most businesses don't sell. Most businesses fail. And you were able to sell for a premium, not just kind of give the business away. So that is a big achievement. And it was important for us to bring someone on the podcast who's done that. To light the fire with somebody. Actually, I'm going to rephrase that, because you said light the match. I'm going to say, to your point,
Add gas to the fire.
burn bigger than just light the match, right? Like, follow it through, take pride in what you do, achieve it. That's really cool.
Well,
So thank you. Much appreciated.
What I enjoyed about the conversation, we did talk about some technicals, which was good. But I think the one thing that doesn't change is this connection to human beings. And I know there's a lot of people that are like, well, AI. And yes, there's going to be some things around AI that are going to take out what's going on for some things on menial tasks. But you can't ever build something with a human component. And that's also something you made a comment of earlier, was there's no business without human to human. It doesn't exist. So I really appreciate that perspective too, because a lot of people make excuses going forward, but the reality is it really is just human to human.
Yeah, you're so true.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. It was my pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the More Profit, Less Stress podcast. If you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast platform and leave a comment or review if you're feeling generous. To learn more about us and what we do, check out our website. Until next time, take care.